I want to let people know what is the story here? What more than a film, it's really a message that the Russian national project is to wipe out Ukrainians, to take Ukraine without Ukrainians, and basically destroy them as a people. Why it usually succeeds is that people on the outside don't figure it out. The perpetrator knows the mission. The perpetrator knows we're going to wipe these people out. The victim knows it because they're under continuous onslaught. And so I saw my value here, which is to put the dots together for the people outside Ukraine to understand. And then my hope has been and continues to be that they'll help, that people on the outside, particularly the West, will come to the aid of the Ukrainians, and they're going to keep fighting. So if you think they're going to just have a bad deal, it's not going to happen. And so you might as well go all in with the Ukrainians.
Today, our guest is Benjamin Goldhagen, who is a filmmaker, whose public relations agency or person reached out to me to bring his work to my attention. He's done 2 films since the war in Ukraine started. He's someone who has family roots going back to Ukraine through his grandparents. So we're going to get to know each other and talk about what he's seen and experienced in Ukraine, and also the role that his experience, particular making films in a war zone, and how those films, what is the goal, what is the point of making these films, and how are they received. So, Benjamin, thank you for making the time to come on today. I'd like to maybe start with just how did you get involved in Ukraine to begin with, or maybe start a little bit with your family history.
Sure. Well, Damien, I was struck when you invited me, found out a little bit about you, and we have really some similarities in our backgrounds, which is really quite striking. Aside from you making films about Ukraine, I'm making films about Ukraine, and your family came from Ukraine. My family also comes from Ukraine, which what is now Ukraine. At that time, it was Poland. Before that, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They had roots. We're Jewish, and they had roots forever in this area until the Holocaust happened. And my father survived the Holocaust, and with his mother and father, almost everybody else was killed. And so I know a lot about war in this area, and a good deal about genocide, because my brother is very well known in the area of genocide studies, as well as my father. And when the full-scale invasion happened, February 24th, 2022, I was talking to my brother Daniel, and after 3 days, when the original onslaught failed, we were talking about what Putin and what the Russians might be up to. And right away, because he understands and he studied genocide over history, that this was going to be the campaign, that the Russian national project at that point was likely to be to take Ukraine without Ukrainians and basically destroy them as a people. Most people in the world thought it was some sort of territorial dispute, or that Putin just wanted land, and without concern for without thinking about what the project is. And so because we have this understanding of how of the mechanism of genocide, or as he and I call it eliminationism, decided my father was saved by the mayor of Chernivtsi. He and his family only lived because of that one man, Traian Popovici. I just can't sit on the sidelines for this one. I want to let people know what is the story here? What more than a film, it's really a message that the Russian national project is to wipe out Ukrainians, Ukraine in the nation, and to do that, and why it usually succeeds. And he wrote a really great book, my brother, and made a film called Worse Than War. Why it usually succeeds is that people on the outside don't figure it out, because they don't figure it out because the perpetrator knows the mission. The perpetrator knows we're going to wipe these people out. The victim knows it because they're under continuous onslaught, and there are different mechanisms of that. How do you wipe out a group of people? And it's not like you kill them all. It's only with the final solution. With Hitler's idea was kill all the Jews, but normally the way it works is there are different tools of what's known as genocide, and they're reported on individually as events, and the dots aren't put together until the people are wiped out. So what are the tools? Mass murder. So we had that in Bucha. Another aspect of it is to wipe out the next generation, because if you cut off the branch, then the people get wiped out. So that's what you're seeing here: the abduction of children, the Russification of them, the rape of women so that they don't have children. And it's a very systematic method of wiping out a group of people that until you understand the system, it gets reported in the world as a war crime or a crime against humanity or a massacre here, or there was a rogue unit that killed some people. And so I saw my value here was to step up and do something that is usually not done in these kinds of eliminations campaigns, which is to put the dots together for the people outside Ukraine to understand. And then my hope has been and continues to be that they'll help, that people on the outside, particularly the West, will come to the aid of the Ukrainians so that Russia is not successful the way they've been successful in Donbass in some respect from 2014. So now it's to save all of Ukraine. And that's really what that's a long explanation, but it's not just philosophical, it's very practical. And I think and I think that, like your films, for example, other people's films, that the media is so important in the information domain of war, that the people who are good at it can step up and help. And that's only part of the reason. There's so many other reasons, but that is really the crux of it for me. Then what I was able to do, because I interviewed my father and I've made films about his life during wartime, is I understood going into war what it's like for people in war, for civilians and soldiers, specifically because it's been a family project basically for so long. So I have the framework in a way to be able to know what I'm interested in order to bring out. That's a long answer to your question. I should probably pause now so you have you have a
But
chance.
no, it's very admirable that you were able to recognize it, for what it is, which is like this campaign that, Russia tried in the 30s with the Holodomor to eliminate
Right.
the Ukrainian culture, language, intelligentsia, national identity. So this has been an ongoing thing going on for generations. But in the same token, and you being of Jewish origin, like I don't know the history, but I've heard, Jewish people say to me, historically, Ukrainians didn't treat Jews very well, and there's some, animosity, and grudges that have carried over from the past, and so for you to sort of like, I don't know, like not let that be an obstacle in your perception of this situation and feel motivated to activate, to me, like says a lot about you as a person, and I don't know, maybe you can explain a little bit more. I just have experienced that, in my lifetime without really knowing too much details about it, but
Yeah,
there has
well,
been this tension.
I've had to learn about it too. And the first thing when people say that to me, or about the history of Ukrainians towards Jews, I point out that Vladimir Zelensky is Jewish, and and he was elected in a democratic country, and so there is and so that gives people some idea that it's not as it that there are Jewish people in Ukraine and Jewish people are accepted, and now he's the president. And as far as the history goes, you can't hate the children for the sins of their fathers. And so during World War II, there were Ukrainian militias that did massacre Jews, and in Ukraine, in what's now Ukraine, um, on the side of Germany, and that had to do, if you want to know a little bit about the history, that had to do with Ukraine. Ukrainian people have wanted a country of their own for a long time. 1991 was the first time they had their own country called Ukraine. And one of the ways that Hitler got the some of the Ukrainian people along to his side, he said, "Look, be on my side, and I'll give you a country when we're done with this whole thing." And so it was pragmatic from that side. They ended up fighting against them sooner or later, and fighting against the Soviets too, because there's been this drive for Ukrainian nationalism for a long time. Jews buy Mercedes-Benz automobiles. They buy VWs too, go to Germany. And we're very forgiving people. Not everybody, but very forgiving people. And you can't have this hatred going on for generation after generation. It's really unhealthy. And so we are very peaceful with Germans and Ukrainians, judge everybody individually. And I've spent a great deal of time in Ukraine myself. My brothers made films there, or a film there, and in Ukraine. And I can tell you that I feel very comfortable in Ukraine, and there is no issue for me being Jewish and me being in Ukraine. And I have many Ukrainian friends in Ukraine. So that is the past, or at least part of the past. Um, and you see in Ukraine many monuments to the Holocaust now, Babi Yar being one of them. But there are many all around in the various towns and cities commemorating that period because it was a dark period. It was a bad period. That's over now. I don't see that as an issue for me at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is. It's in the past, and you're right. It's not healthy to just like stay in the past and you know categorize all these people who didn't exist at that time, and somehow you at least have to start with a clean slate and go from there.
Yeah,
So, okay, so granted, maybe I'm wrong here, but you weren't really producing films in recent years. So going there to make
right.
a film was something also a bit of a new thing, or is that right? Or
Yeah, well, I've worked in media all my life. I went to the University of Southern California and spent all my time in the cinema department, and I majored in history. It's always been my interest to combine politics or historical things to know something about the world in order to make films. So that's the genesis of it. And then I worked in TV for a while on TV shows in the United States. So I worked in political media for a while, and then in marketing, and then I raised children. That's another thing that happened. I took a little time off to do that, and I've made films, by the way, all during this time. I just haven't released them. They've been a very long and big project that has to do with my father and my family life. It's sort of an epic in some ways, total project. It's taken 10 years, which I think is very interesting, but he didn't want anybody to see it or any of it until after his death.
okay.
And he died this year. Done a lot of filmmaking, a lot of media, but my first feature that people have seen was To the Zero Line in Ukraine.
Yeah, so let's talk about To the Zero Line. I haven't seen that one. But like How did you make it? When did you get to Ukraine? You told me that you were living in Kramatorsk for some time. Like,
Yeah,
you
a
know,
little time. That not I had to get to Kramatorsk to do that, but I didn't start there. Um,
right.
how it started, it was really the first days of the full-scale invasion, and 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 I had spoken to my brother, and we said, this is a genocidal campaign, eliminationist campaign. And I said, oh, this is bad. This is people don't realize what's happening here, but this is what's happening. And my she's sort of like my ex-girlfriend or my closest friend. I don't know exactly what to call Paula, but she's a doctor, and she goes to underprivileged places in New York City, and she goes to underprivileged places around the world every year, pretty much to do humanitarian aid with a group of doctors. And so I texted her from the parking lot of Target, and I said, they need doctors in Ukraine, and why don't you go there this year? And she said, okay, she's that kind of person. She said because she's done it. So she's been to Ghana, she's, other Haiti, other places around the world. And she said, I will if you do. That was her message back. And I said, all right. And I had no idea what I would do. I just, we do a lot of things together. We've traveled a lot of places. So I said, all right, fine. And then I thought, what the hell am I
It's a
going to do?
date. It's a date.
Yeah, right. That's right. And I'm a very decent photographer, and I thought, I'll go and take some photos. It came together that that the genocidal campaign was really the story for me. And I realized, what? I'll make a film. And what I'll do is we're going to film her. She was taking medicine, substantial amount of medicine from New York City to Ukraine to donate, as well as to help treat patients. And so my idea was to film her in New York, getting the medicine like at JFK, and then, delivering it to the hospital. And that would be a nice little film. That would be a film. And it's a longer story, but I'll try to keep it shorter. And then what happened was I realized that there's much more going on here. It's not just delivering medicine. There's a whole war here. People are doing stuff. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, nobody in Ukraine knew what to do either. This was kind of a shock to many
Sure.
people,
Yeah.
and so there was a scramble to get stuff done, to uh, to make camo nets, to have weapons, to get training, to fight or to become a refugee. There was just or as and in to the zero line, what the zero line is about, and so I found myself in the middle of this whole thing. And I realized this is very interesting. This is very interesting to tell the story from of basically what some people have described as how a whole country goes to war.
Hmm.
So and so that the mayor of Lviv, Mayor Sotavy, is in it. Soldiers at the front are in it. People in the rear. It connects the home front with the front line, and the activities that people are involved in. And it shows how it's all how the whole country, uh, how the weave of the country became the fabric of their fight. I was learning as Ukraine was learning what this war was going to be, what it was, and what it was going to be. And so, sort of like what you did with Maidan. I really love your film with, a lot of the stuff that you've done because in your films because you are able to show the moment, not just people talking about it. And then you have the moment plus the reflection on the moment.
Mm.
And so that was what I was able to do. It took the whole first year of the war we were filming before we put it together. So someone would say to me, "Hey, this guy is painting cars, like they're getting cars from me." And this was all novel at the time. They're like someone's driving cars, and this guy in this village is painting cars, and then they bring them to the front. Or these women are making in the same village are making vareniki, and once a week, a truck comes, freezes them, and takes them to the zero line. And so it was like people are coming to me. It's like, hey, do you know this? You want to film this? And it was like the country was getting mobilized, and we were basically we were just going around the countryside in a lot of ways. We were finding out just as they were discovering what this war was at that time. And I think we did a really great job of both the what was happening internationally, people coming in, to help, as well as what was happening inside. And we show the whole cycle of life in it as well. There's birth, there's death and grieving, there's wedding, there's the church, there's the political aspect, the mayor of Lviv, and they're the soldiers, and you really get to know some of these people and how they're connected sometimes with each other and also with the country and the cause. I'm not really that interested in combat to show.
Mhm.
Combat's very interesting, but I'm more interested in the soldier as a person rather than as a guy who like shoots something. I'm interested in what he's doing when he's not shooting something. But I was afraid to go to the zero line. I was afraid to go to the front, or I thought it was a dumb thing. Probably is. And so we tried to get footage that would be suitable for what we were doing. So it would get, and now, I didn't know anybody going into Ukraine really, and was building a network of connections. And in war, nobody trusts anybody until they know you can be trusted. And so it takes time to develop the relationships you need to be able to even speak to anybody. We gave like GoPros to the soldiers, and we wouldn't get any footage that was any good. Like guy because he's not a camera guy, and he doesn't know what to film. And so he would have like a GoPro on his helmet, and then he would be fighting, and we get some footage, and then he turns his head, and we don't have anything that we can use. So we tried many times to get footage, basically, but not going there. That I wanted for the purpose of the film, and it had to be a certain quality and all that. So then I realized, you know what? It's not really honest to make a film about this war without me going there. I can't ask anybody to go there for me because I felt that that was wrong. I have to go myself. And so, um, and so that was a big moment for me personally. But I felt this story needs to be told, and I can tell it well. I wanted to show Christmas at the front. And so I got in touch with the press officer, and he said, "We don't know where we're going to be at Christmas, And I said, "Well, wherever you are, wherever you are, I'm going to come." But I had no other contact. I didn't have another brigade to go to, basically.
Mhm.
I had lots of other people I knew, but this one, I had the in. And so I said, "Wherever you are, I'll come. We're going to do Christmas." And so I said, just tell me like 2 weeks before you want to come. I'll tell you where we are. So the way it works is a lot of times you just get a pin, like in Google Maps, and that's, with latitude, longitude, and that's where you go. With not much else discussed. He said, okay, here it is, meet me here at this time. And I show it to Yarko, my producer, who, we got to know each other. I met him on this. And I said, "You sure you want to go there?" I said, "What do you think?" I just said, "What do you think?" He said, "Let's go." It was Bakhmut. And so we ended up in Bakhmut during Wagner. Um,
Oh, wow.
and I just, it was like, fuck it, we're making this film, and this is what we're going to do. So we end up, actually, our sound guy, on our first day, our sound guy, who was from Kiev, he's, we're filming some soldiers, and he said, "How far is it from Bakhmut?" And they laughed, and they said, "You're in Bakhmut." If you see to the zero line, um, you'll see Christmas in of these guys, and it's really really fantastic. You really get a feeling of a few things. One is the Christian heritage of the Ukrainian people is very deep and very strong. And Christmas there, there is the 12 dishes, everywhere. And you're from that heritage. Christmas, the 12 dishes to Christmas in Ukraine is like turkey and stuffing to Thanksgiving in the United States.
Yeah.
Um, there and so you can't have it. It would be like we're going to have a Thanksgiving dinner and it's going to be McDonald's. People just don't even think that way. And so and they're going to have a meal. We're going to film it. And so, what are you going to do for the meal? We said, we're going to have the meal. I said, look, what are you going to make? I said, the 12 dishes. And so, and they did. And you can see it. It's the tradition, but it's more than just them making it. Celebrated in three different places at the front. One is a large group. Um, One is a large group at the headquarters, which in the film you'll see later, shortly later, that whole building was destroyed. It's all rubble now. So the commander took they packed boxes for the guys at the stabilization point. And so they take it to the stabilization point, and it's a smaller group that's having Christmas, same meal, because they took it from the kitchen to that smaller group. And you see a different dynamic of the people there from the whole, like from the large group. And then the commander next takes it to, or it might be the other way around, to the ambulance, which is the evacuation point, which is right there, right where the fighting is, pretty much. The two guys who are on duty that night on Christmas, when the combat medic takes a guy off, that's where they take him to, that point.
Mm.
It's a really dangerous spot, especially if you're in an ambulance. And and it's just two guys in the pitch black, pretty much pitch black of the back of the ambulance with the same 12 dishes. Each of those settings, you get a different sense of the community of people, which is what I really wanted to do throughout the film, is to show the community both in the large sense of the country, but also of individuals, of husbands and wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, um, and also, the community of a church, the community of an operating room. We did such a good job, I have to say, re, conveying what the country is, that the guys at Army TV, they asked if they could dub it into Ukraine and show it on Army TV. And so it's been showing on Army TV.
Mm.
It really does a great job of showing how the whole country went to war. The Steel Porcupine, my current one, is something altogether different, but I'll get to that. So, um,
Yeah, so I mean, outside of Ukraine, did you have screenings? Did you try to get it positioned somewhere, distributed? Or were you just like, I'm just going to put this up online so it's available, and like what did you want to do with it, and what was the response to it?
yeah, well, when it comes, about the Steel Porcupine, both of them, they're very different. I positioned them both very differently. If I'll mention the Steel Porcupine now, if you don't mind,
Okay.
um, because I because the first one is really how the whole country went to war, and what I wanted in that one was I wanted Western audiences to see that they are very much like the people in Ukraine. That this is not like when Afghanistan was being fought. It was like over there, people don't know what's going on, and there are people who are just so culturally different that it was really hard for Westerners to relate. And what I wanted to do in the first film was to create that bridge so that people in the West could identify with the common humanity and also the common music and the common beliefs of the people in Ukraine, so that in a sense bind the people together. That was the purpose of that one. And the purpose of this one, and now I'm telling the story of the whole war over time because, I will continue to make films as the war continues and into Reconstruction is my idea. But with the Steel Porcupine, I knew that this year was the year of the most important thing going on this year, without a doubt, in my mind, is the geopolitical alignment and the industrial competition. And the fighting in a way of vamp. There's not been much movement on the battlefield. This is kind of a holding pattern of the war that I thought back a while ago because I had to make this film, that this year what would the signal events would be the geopolitical and the industrial competition. which will lead us to the next phase of the war. That's how I was thinking.
Hmm.
So and I felt that it's really important and so I made a political film. And I felt that the West, the people in the West, especially, so this one's really geared more towards decision makers. Because I felt that they did not understand that this is not a war about territory for the Ukrainians. And it's not a war about territory for the Russians. Like you mentioned, it's uh, that with the Holodomor in 1933, and since then, the Russians have tried many times, or the Russians slash Soviets have tried many times to wipe out the Ukrainian nation. And so there's in 1933 there was the famine. In the 1950s there was the not just the Ukrainians but this area. So there was the deportation of the Tartars. What many people don't realize that even after World War II was finished in 1945, the Ukrainian people were fighting the Soviets until about 1953. So the war is over for the all of Europe except for Ukraine and Russia. They're still, and Soviet Union, they're still fighting. And I felt that this conflict was not understood by Western decision makers. That they kept thinking that it was possible if Ukraine bled long enough, if this war went on long enough, that the Ukrainian people would somehow or other come to some sort of ceasefire with Russia. And that would, but they had a ceasefire and then after 2014, with the 20 before, and then it was really the breaking of the ceasefire. It's kind of a ceasefire, let's just call it that, in the full-scale invasion. So I realized that the whole idea that the decision makers had that the Ukrainians were just going to kind of like say, all right, we fought enough, we're going to stop now. And what Zelensky said at some point, he said, we're not going to just have a pause in this conflict so that they can come at us again.
Yeah.
And so so this film was intended to show the Steel Porcupine what that the Russian national project is to wipe out the Ukrainian nation, and that the Ukrainians know this, and they're not going to they're going to keep fighting. So if you think they're going to just have a bad deal, it's not going to happen. And so you might as well go all in with the Ukrainians. And that's really the message of the film, is that the only way to finish this conflict is for the West to back them, and to back them in the terms of victory that the Ukrainians decide, because Ukrainians have to agree to it, to it. Otherwise, they're not going to agree, and they're going to keep fighting because they're fighting for their existence. That's how I put this one together, and it shows also the history of bad deals, the Minsk agreement, like in it, Bill Clinton says he regrets having
Yeah,
basically
I wanted to ask you about that interview with Bill Clinton because I'd never seen that before, or even that footage of the
yeah,
Budapest memorandum signing.
yeah. Well, what happened with that is that I realized to go back in history, we couldn't film history, but I was really fortunate because I found a really great uh, archival researcher. Her credits in the film, and um, and we worked night and day for months and months and months to get the footage together for that film. And it was a huge project in itself, because it needed to be of a certain quality. The film looks like one full film. It doesn't look like old footage, and there's like a whole artistic technique to make a million pieces of film from a million different places, including footage that we shoot ourselves, to look like one nice movie. And I think we achieved that. And so with the Bill Clinton thing, she was really great. And I also, look, I know some history too, but we'd go out and we said, like, we need to find this, like, and so she found it. It was the only time he ever was interviewed. He talked about it. It was on Irish TV, RTE TV. And he did an interview and he said he regrets he said Ukraine probably agreed to giving up the nuclear because of me. He said, and that they wouldn't have agreed to that if, and that he regrets that he did that. He regrets that he forced Ukraine's hand. And he said, and Putin wouldn't have pulled this stunt. I think that's the way he puts it, if they still had their nuclear.
Yeah.
And so American, for somebody like Donald Trump, that to show the majesty of the mission of helping Ukrainian people, because in this film, and it's only 37-minute film, and there's no narration. Um, Half of it's music, just music, and just it's without any talking at all.
I
And
like the
so,
music. I like the musical selections, I have to say. Like it definitely I found it pretty effective. Like these
thank you,
musical
thank you.
montages and the
Yeah,
combination with the visuals. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of times I choose music, or I have like a whole lot of music that, and then before we cut it, or before I even film it, and then I film it with the music in mind that we're going to that we're gonna that we're gonna
Mm.
that we're gonna that'll end up marrying it to. And so General Eisenhower's in there at the beginning, and we have Nate Vance in there, and Nate is J.D. Vance's cousin, first cousin, and he fought in Ukraine for 3 years. And he came back when JD was elected vice president, and he introduces the film, and there's a theme through the film of children, what the Russians are doing to abduct children, and to abduct and Russify them. And in the end of the film, it's really just a family, a Ukrainian family, taking a walk in Kiev for about 7 minutes of the film or something like that. And there's no talking, it's just music. I
Yeah.
feel like crying because I cry almost every time I work on that scene. And many people tell me that when they see that scene at the end that they're in tears, because I wanted because it's also a very optimistic film as well, because the Ukrainian spirit's very strong.
Yeah, it shows that life continues on during these conditions, after these conditions, and
Yeah, and it's still not known what the outcome will be. One of the aspects of making a film like this is that you don't know the outcome. And that's kind of like, because we don't know what's happening next year. And so and I don't want to tie it up with a loose end. It ends with ambiguity. It's just the hus the father and the mother and the child are looking out at the Dnipro on a bridge on Kiev, and you don't know what is the future, but they're looking out, and it's a nice family moment for the family.
I mean, we know Ukrainians are going to keep fighting with whatever means they have,
Yeah,
because oppression or occupation by Russians is Bucha, basically, and that's happening in many other places, not just Bucha, in occupied territories. So Ukrainians are aware of this and this genocidal desire. So, but it seems like a lot of Americans are not. They still talk about like NATO enlargement and like all this sort of like Russian, propaganda, like has really infiltrated um,
it
the
it
media, the conversation a
yeah.
lot more so than I expected it would. This because it seems like it's such a black and white sort of situation.
There's all kind different people have different understanding, or different, they're different people have different concepts of what's going on, if they have any concept at all. And my feeling at this point, and why I made to the Steel Porcupine, and you asked me about who I want to see this. I want politicians to see this. I want decision makers to see this. I really don't care if how much of the public sees it. I just have to, if you look at it, because I'm interested in being an effective communication and messaging campaign. And I want everybody to see it. Don't get me wrong; it would be great. But who's going to? But right now, who's making the decisions? Who determines what weapons go at what rate, sort of thing, and or what treaty there is, or what sanction there is, or whatever it is. And there's only a small group of people making these decisions, and they're making it in the interest of their country, what they believe is the interest of their country. And I don't want to get too much into politics in each of the countries, but and there's been a lack of understanding on their part of that a Ukraine the terms what Russia's goal war aims are and what the Ukrainian terms of victory are. And I felt that if they understand the war aims and the terms of victory truly, then it will have an effect on the decisions they make. And so what in the general concept of like I want this, it would be great if the right or the left is behind this war. I didn't feel that that was that important this year in this aspect of at this moment in this war, that the what was going on in these various meetings amongst these different parties is really what's determining the assistance that Ukraine wants, and the Ukraine needs, or if you want to flip it, that Ukraine does not need the United States or Europe to align with more on the Russian side. So that's really so when it comes to who I want to see it, I want these people to see it um, because they're the people who are going to help the be able to help the war.
Well,
What the
how do you get them to see? How do you reach them? I mean, how do you get their
I can't.
attention?
How do you get their attention? That's a good question, and it's one that I don't know the full answer to,
Yeah,
and I can probably tell you when the war is over.
yeah. Mm.
Um, I think that I think it's possible. I think with social media, it's possible. I don't want to go into all the details about that, but I think that there is a way, and I think that during this time, if you look at how the perception of the war, how people are talking differently about the war now, about genocide, when 3 months ago they were talking about deals and territory, and the concept of this nature that I was talking about was not really under discussion. Some people were thinking about it, but now this is really how people understand the war. It's even the decision makers. And I have some theories on that, but it's not really the time to talk about it.
Well, I wanted to ask you, this word genocide. It seems the people are very hesitant to apply it in this situation, especially academics. That it has to fit like, you know, they have this checklist. It's got to check off like all these 10 boxes or whatever
Yeah.
it is before they start using this word. I mean, I don't understand like the hesitation because if we use this word, does that mean we're obligated to do something more than we are, or does that sort of change the dynamic? Like, but there's this. I don't know if this isn't a genocide. What is a genocide?
Yeah,
But
what happened? You're exactly right, and this includes the UN because part of, and I'm not very good on this is all part of the international law and the Genocide Convention, um, and this is something that my brother has written, not written. He's like one of the great experts on it, and why, and to answer, he can answer that question better than you. He's made films and written books about it, but so I've learned from him, and the answer to that is that the lawyers get involved or the politicians get involved. And let's look at a few things. First of all, most countries are authoritarian in the world and they do bad things. So they're not going to say other people do bad things because they don't want to be accused of doing bad things also. So it's better, war crimes. This is a war crime that, there's this soldier raped a woman. That's a bad thing too. And then they get hung up on this term because it's like check, check, check box. And there's one box that will not be checked until after the war because that's how it always works, which is called intent. Is that in order for there to be, according to these definitions, in a, like the to be able to a campaign to wipe out a population one way or another, there has to be the intention to do it. So the rape or the bombing, let's say the bombing of a hospital, which happened yesterday in Ukraine, that well, it was a bombing of it. At the UN, they described it as a bombing of a hospital and an atrocity. But was it part of the intent of Russia to bomb that hospital in order to wipe out the next generation of children? No, we can't prove that. So we don't have genocide. This is the problem with checking these boxes. And that's the game that's played, is the intent game. Or the like, what is the motivation for the Bucha? Well, they just wiped out the town. So what? It's like that's bad. We'll put it in the what's bad category. And that's what and so part of what I've been doing with this war, and partly, in various places, is to say, look, this is a national project. And the project is to wipe out Ukrainians and get away from this concept of checking the boxes, which is why my brother uses the term eliminationism. Because the purpose is to eliminate a people from a place. And you don't have to get caught up with the checking the boxes. You say, what are the mechanisms of eliminationism or genocide, take out intent? And it's these things. It's, mass murder, abduction of children, deportation of people from their land to another land, importation of other people into the land, which is what they're doing in Crimea, is bringing Russians into Crimea, and raping of women. And the purpose of that is, because women who get raped in these kinds of situations generally don't have children. And it's more than just, none of this equals terror per se. All of this equals genocide slash eliminationism. And so I've, by talking this way, and I've talked this way greatly, and the Russians don't like this probably, is that I'm framing this war differently from how in the work that I do, both in whatever venue, because the work that I do as being as this is what it's all about, and the Ukrainians know this is what it's all about, and I think at this point probably all the decision makers know what this is about, and the people and gradually people in other walks of life will know what it's about. But it's not important for everybody to know what's it about. It's important to get results right now. I'm an activist.
Well, going back to, outreach, I mean, have you had response? Okay, for instance, like, because I know from my own film experiences, if you can get your film into a festival and you have a
Yeah,
theatrical type of screening, you get a little press, you have like this sort of like more high value sort of presentation. All that takes a lot of time and
yeah,
luck to see if that can even happen. And with these kind of films, that there's a bit of a time factor. Like, so I experienced that. Like, oh, by the time my film got, I submitted and maybe it got in somewhere. It's like 2 years, 3 years after the event already, and
yeah.
like,
Well,
people like things have moved on. So like, I don't know,
you're
how are you
100%.
trying to get your film out there, but getting it some attention? Because you just put it up on YouTube, then it's like sitting on the shelf, right? You have to get
Yeah,
people there still.
you're 100% right on that. I've learned over experience about this, and I have a completely different view of what's going on with the not completely different view. I have a view of what's going on in overall in the entertainment business. So I'm going to say a lot of things that are completely contrary to the common belief or wisdom. I don't think film festivals are that useful for what I'm doing. And I don't think that normal distribution is useful for what I'm doing. Because as you mentioned, um, timing is everything. Because this is a war. This is not, I'm not making a pretty picture, a love story. Though I could make a love story about a war, but that takes place during war. So basically, it needs to fit into the news cycle in some respect. Let's say it's and so, for example, this film came out to the Steel Porcupine came out the uh, the day or the day before Putin went to Alaska, and the meeting in Alaska, and I started making it with the idea that it would come out at the critical time that the discussions were being held amongst the leaders of these countries, because that's really who I want to see this film. And so the timing was really important, which meant that I can't, for the films that I make, I I don't want to have a Netflix or an NPR or any other kind of outlet that's going to basically embargo it for their own purposes, because my purpose is influence in this way. Not remember, I'm not interested in maximal audience. I'm interested in the right audience. I'm a marketer, and so my interest is in my target market. And I mean, I just am thinking, I used to be head of new media at an advertising company in New York. And so I understand marketing, targeting, and it's in my mind because timing was everything. Like you say, the war is going on. In the end, I'm putting it together in a way that it can be seen as the history of the war, of the whole country at war. This is my third hour of completed film. Um, so that meant that I had to put it online because there is no other way of, put it online for free because I didn't want it behind a paywall. Because if you put it behind a paywall, automatically people won't see it. The two most important things was to have it for free and have it available when it would help the country, help Ukraine the most. At the moment, would help Ukraine the most. This film will not be as timely a year from now or 6 months from now. But right now, it is the exactly what people need to see because it's what is being thought of in these, in the because it for the various reasons that I mentioned. So that meant we had to build our own website because YouTube, we're age restricted. We have violence in it. We have blood and all this stuff, and and we got age restricted on the YouTube platform. So we have like no views on it because we don't even try to drive people to it. We built our own website for it,
Mhm.
and because it's advocacy, we have an FAQ there, and people go there and they have an experience, they learn something. It's almost an educational experience. How you get your market is another question. And to the zero line, same thing. Um, Built it in chapters. So each chapter it's 2.5 hour film, but each chapter is 30 minutes because that's how people watch things. And on to the zero line, we have like about 2 million people, 2.5 million people. Those are real numbers. Those are our numbers, not just like YouTube numbers.
Oh, wow.
Um, and the way we did it is through social media mostly, um, because you can get, there are influencers, so-called influencers that have millions of people and they get lots of audience. So I figure, you know what, if they can do it, we could probably find audience too if we figure out how to do it. And so it was, Twitter is very important because that's really where people are. I'm not really, it'd be great to get, targeting. It would be great to get. Um, the Twitter audience, but because time is limited, money's limited, I'm not going after the Twitter audience. Um, but the X audience is really important. And so we focus on that, and we're pretty well known within certain parts of the pro-Ukrainian community. And we built up to the zero line a really strong following um, through social media, through podcasts, through whatever mechanism. And that led us to crowdfund the second film.
Hmm.
And the second film, we got about 1,000 people to donate um, through crowdfunding. And so at this point, I have something of a following but they're pretty much all Ukraine fanatics, I call them.
Hmm.
Ukrainiacs, and I am too. And that is not useful anymore for right now. What you have to have crossover in a marketing sense to those who are not pro-Ukraine. And so especially decision makers in the various countries. And so that is one of the reasons why Nate Vance is in it. JD's cousin, because I figured, put Nate Vance in there, it'll probably attract some people who are interested in other things beside Ukraine, who maybe have no interest in Ukraine. So military people become interested in it, and other people too. And also because we have many people from the administration in this film. So part of it is I built the content to attract the people who I'm interested in to watch it.
Mm.
And it's only a small, that's unique to this film. So film festivals, you have to enter them. I don't really, I think it sounds nice when you get awards, you can put a clover leaf from Film Freeway on there, but it really doesn't get you audience. And I don't think write-ups get you audience anymore. And I'm not interested in that. Podcasts, I think, are very useful,
Yeah.
which is why I'm doing podcasts. You mentioned, I hired somebody to help put podcasts together because that's really useful. Podcasts is where you can find a lot of people who don't, and I think, how do you get in people's feed, and how do you get and the podcast is part of their feed, and so that's another avenue.
Yeah, I mean, this is a long format podcast, so it definitely also probably also appeals to the same certain Ukrainiacs, overlap
Yeah,
group as you, because it's, people who want to really do a deeper dive into these topics. But, I enjoy it because I can tell a lot more stories in a shorter amount of time, and sort of document all these different people who are activated and involved in Ukraine. And it's sort of like the the quickest way I can do it and most efficient way without spending time to tell one story. I can tell a new story almost like every week or 2 weeks, which is has an appeal to me these days.
yeah, and Joe Rogan has shown that people will sit for 3 hours if they're interested. Even if they're not interested, they can have it on and do the laundry or something, and then
Yeah.
because it's part of people's lives. And there's a lot of trust that people have when they listen to a podcast. Um, so I think that that's a very useful medium to, and so certain ones and so I've done all kinds of different podcasts, with different audiences. And really these days, nobody even reads film reviews anymore. I mean, it used to be that a film review meant something. It really doesn't. The comments mean more.
Yeah.
And the comments mean more to people than the film review. People don't even know the names of film reviewers. And it used to be, oh yeah, this film reviewer who reviews films for whatever. That doesn't even exist for most people anymore. It's just a whole new world. So I've stepped into that world, and I'm not really interested in the old world that much. I don't think it's valid. I mean, it sounds great, but it's not really what I'm looking for in the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, and that I've sent you that short film when I took my film to show in the Donbass in eastern Ukraine. And I did that instead of spending time trying to, up, put the film festivals at that time and find like a traditional distributor, because I felt like that was where it could be most useful at that moment in time, is try to like educate these people in Eastern Ukraine about what had happened, the year before, and how things started in areas that watch a lot of Russian TV. And it was like really a rewarding experience, and unique experience as a filmmaker to have these type of like screenings, and you saw the reactions of
Yeah,
people
one
where it
one
really like
person
affected them, and you saw it and you felt it. It was like, wow.
Yeah, one person said you really should go around yourself with it because it makes it so much more interesting and important when you're in the audience, that you as the director, Damien, showing the film. And if you believe that film can, if you do the work because you think it can have an effect, a positive effect on people, or have some kind of effect on people in their lives, then the then then that's really the thing. I mean, and you do it for art, you do it because you like it for all these different reasons. But if you want to get a message out, if you want to have an impact on somebody, it's not really the numbers, because the numbers, people, on YouTube, no offense to YouTube, people watch 10 minutes of it and then it's over. And I think YouTube is a great medium, and that's great for people to watch stuff. I watch stuff, I put stuff up on YouTube, but the numbers are just so gamed right now, that there's one film I saw the day it came out, there were 2 million views. on YouTube. After that, 6 months later, there were 2 million views. So it or 2,000,001 views because you can pump up the numbers on YouTube easy. You basically they're bots that buy those numbers.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of chicanery goes around. I want to have impact, and if only on one person, like you said, the people in your audience. And I want to make a film that is meaningful to me, that's important, and I've been influenced by in my life, I see my life because of what I've learned from art. And so if maybe someone will be influenced that way, I don't know. But now I'm also interested in politics. So yeah, the um, the idea that when you took it around, uh, that meant a lot to those people, and and they'll remember that. It was very cool that you showed it to them. How did you get that idea, by the way? Because you like to go into to the liberated areas or towns, and then show them that.
Well, I had that idea from my Orange Revolution film, and having traveled to those areas in the past and interacted with people there, and realizing that they just like are not being getting the right information. And I remember in trying to get my Orange Chronicles out there, being like, and seeing the effect that it had on audiences in America and also in Ukraine, like, wow, like the Ukrainian government should be taking this out there and showing it to this people so they know like what is the truth of what happened. And obviously that the government didn't do that. The Orange government didn't do a lot of things, but after sort of like having that thought and that experience with the first film, the second film, it just was an idea that appealed to me, and I forget I mentioned it maybe to some friends or somewhere along the way, just sort of casually, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, I got this contact. We can let's see if, I think they'd be interested in hosting you and organizing it." And so I went to Slavyansk, and the Ukrainian Patriots there basically like the libraries organized it, and the priest that was there, he organized several screenings, and people were, there's like an infrastructure for it, and it's sort of, you know, it turned into a little more than I expected. So that,
Yeah, it's a really, really, it really impressed me in so many ways. One, after I saw your film, I I was talking to Yarko, who's my producer, who's Ukrainian, and I said, because I've known about some of the things about the people who remain in the Donbass, um, because I've both been there, met some who have left, some who stayed, and also different people in Ukraine have different opinions or different observations. And I didn't realize how basically the people who are in the occupied territories truly have been affected, that they're living in a different reality than everybody else in this world, essentially. That they've been, and I don't want to use the term brainwashed, but they've had these pro-Soviet or pro-Russian, anti-West concepts or beliefs that have been either forced into them, or they're just pretending that they are. And in your film, you can really see that one of the people in your film says basically that she doesn't want to show the Ukrainian colors, I think it was, her flag, when she goes outside, even though they're in a liberated area, because her neighbors basically uh, don't don't really want to see that, sort
Mhm.
of thing. So the Russification of it's going to be a problem at the end of this war, um, in the occupied territories. The children have to come back, and not all the children will come back, unfortunately, I'm sure. Some have been killed, and some just won't come back for various reasons. But the people have really been, if you want to think about it, they've been in a prison, and it's almost like Stockholm syndrome is
Yeah.
the sense I get. And I didn't quite understand it as well until I saw your film. When the people who had been liberated, they really have to go through rehabilitation. Um, uh, Many of them,
Yeah.
in order to reenter to, for their thoughts to become like unscrambled
Yeah.
by this kind of thing.
I mean, I wonder, that was made before the full-scale invasion. So I wonder how much the full-scale invasion may have changed that, that setting. Like that there's, a number who maybe have second thoughts about that or had to make a decision, okay, am I for Ukraine or am I for Russia? Um, there's a lot of Russian speakers obviously fighting in the Ukrainian army and those all those regions. So, I always go back to this, Putin's calculus of defending Russian speakers by destroying their cities and killing them. I don't know if it really won as many hearts and minds as they had in the past, that they already had in their team on their side, like
Well, just like I point out that Zelensky's Jewish, his first language is also Russian.
yeah,
And also my press officer on the 24th Brigade is from Kremena, and his first language is Russian, and he's been fighting the Russians for quite some time. It's like saying that it's such a ridiculous concept in some way. It's like saying if someone in the United States says they're Polish American, does that mean that they will fight for Poland,
yeah,
or they want Poland to beat the United States? It's just a ridiculous concept if you think about it in from the American perspective, that that people who are generally speaking, they become citizens of a country, and and the people who whatever language they speak, we have in the United States we have people who speak Spanish, who don't think that they're South Americans, they think that they're Americans. So we have many languages in the United States. You have two main languages in Russia, East and West, and but one country. And it's because of the ignorance of some people, or the propaganda of the Russians say, well, everybody who speaks Russian. That's like saying we speak English, therefore our loyalty is to the
England,
King of England.
yeah,
We actually fought the King of England.
yeah,
So, I mean, yeah, and beat the King of England, and in a lot of ways, and beat the King of England. So the entire concept is based on people being gullible. No, but if you really understand Maidan, which I understand it to some degree, um, it was not just against a corrupt government, or against, but it was the desire for these people to have freedom. And you show that in your other film, that it was really turning to be a free people in a free country. And what some people, I mean, most people don't even think about the Maidan Revolution, um, or what happened during that time, who are in the West. But some people, when they look at it, they say, well, it was overthrow of one dictator for, a corrupt leader. But it wasn't only that. It was, and it's what this war is about now, which is the desire to turn to become a free people, a modern people, with agency and freedom. And it's like you have in your film. What's the name of last your most recent film?
freedom or death,
Right, Freedom or Die. That's really how people feel. That was Maidan,
yeah,
and that's what's going on now.
yeah.
It's the same. It's the same fight, and Russia cannot win this fight. It's really obvious at this point. Um, it's just what they want to destroy on the way to losing is what it comes down to. I think it's now becoming understood that this is a fight for freedom, and to be a free people, and to have their own way of life, and to maintain um, their own culture, their own religion, their own language. And they didn't have that until the fall of the Soviet Union. It was they didn't have a country until 1991. And then Maidan was their chance to become truly who they are,
Absolutely.
as a people. And that's not understood by many people outside Ukraine. And I did not know it quite until I got involved in this thing. And it turned out that one of my first camera guys was one of the students at Maidan. And he was beat up and he was arrested and he had his teeth broken. He was so grateful for me to be in Ukraine at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, because he understood more about what this is about than I did at that point. I wanted to tell the story. He understood what the story was,
Yeah.
what was at stake. And I didn't really understand that aspect of it. I understood the genocide aspect of it, which was the drive of the Russians to eliminate them. But I didn't yet understand the drive of the uh, Ukrainian people to one was to for their culture to be preserved, but also going back to the Maidan Revolution, like the American Revolution, it was to be free. And that aspect of it, I only learned by through time, understanding the country better, understanding the people better, and hearing people say it again and again when I'm filming them, is that in to the steel porcupine, Rita, who's in it, who has the baby towards the end, not the couple, but the other one. She we filmed her like 2 years ago, and she said, "I want to be a free. I don't have a child now, and but I want to be in a free country. If I do have a child, I want my child to grow up in a free country." And I remembered that. And when we were making the Steel Porcupine, we never used that. We didn't use any of the footage of her in the first film. And we just didn't have, it wasn't the right, it was already 2.5 hours long. It wasn't the right thing. And then I remembered her saying that. And I'm in touch with many of the people who are in the films still.
Mhm.
And she had a baby. She got married, she had a baby. And I thought this would be great for the current film, Where the War Is Now. We'll have her say what show the footage of her saying 2 years ago, I don't have a baby, but I want to be a mom. But I want in order to save my family, I have to save the country. And then to show her with the child. And and then that's how we did it. And so we filmed her with the child. So we contacted her again and said, Rita, we want you had a baby, we want to film you and the baby. And I knew that I didn't want to have any words. After she said that, her with the child is a discovery for the audience. Then you understand what Maidan means in a way, or what this is about.
And it is accurate because any soldier that you talk to will tell you that they're there to sacrifice for a better future for their kids. That's why they're willing to fight and die is so that their kids and grandkids can grow up in a free country and they don't have to fight this. Like that's
Yeah,
no.
yeah, it's that's one of the, it's like, why you do it? It's like, I'm doing it for my mother. In I think it's into the Zero Line. There's artillery guy, and he says, I'm doing it I'm doing it for my village, and for my oh, he said, I'm doing it for my mother because I don't want Muscovy to go to my village. People are protecting they're fighting for their land, for their way of life, which is, and they're not going to give up. I'm more interested in what we're talking about, which is the psyche of the country and the psyche of the people and the purpose, that their intention and their purpose. And rarely in film does that ever come across in documentary, because you're telling about something. And that's why I don't use a narrator. No offense to narrators. I think you do a great job, actually, because you're also a participant, in the event. But I want the audience to the viewer to uh, meet these people on their own terms. And so you don't find me in the films. I'm not in the films. It makes it much harder in a way, because I have to find a way of it being emotional and meaningful without the normal documentary explanation. There's no exposition, generally speaking. Um,
Well, I thought it was a very effective film. I mean, when I watched it, it was better than I expected. You know, there's a lot of films out there on the topic, and I was like, oh wow, this is actually really well put together and effective, and covers a lot of angles, and you know, has a lot of depth and contextualization, I guess, more than anything. I was like, okay, he this, you know, like he's really like
well,
showing the tying, connecting the dots and showing the picture. And I was like, wow, it's really, really well done. So
well, thanks for
congrats.
that. Thanks for that. We were, it's a lot of work, and it takes a good team to do it.
Well, if someone's listening to this, how can they find your film?
Well, we're at the steelporcupine.com is really the one to see now, because it's about where the war is now, geopolitically, and the mentality of the various sides. Um, and then the other film is To the Zero Line, which is at tothezeroline.com, and and they're both free, and they'll always be free. And it's part of a whole series that, like I said, that I'm putting together that will continue throughout the war. So this is where the war is now, and then the next one will be where the war is. Won't be the same film; it'll be different. Where the war is, and we're in the process of making it at the next stage of the war.
Hmm. Yeah, it looks like it's not going to end anytime soon, like, or at least not in the next year.
It,
Yeah.
God knows. I mean, anything can happen. It's Look. I thought it would be over a long time ago in Ukraine's favor. In
Yeah.
Ukraine's
Well, it could have been if they had all the support that, you know, was dragged out over 2 years if they had it,
Well,
right? You know.
I'll tell you what happened with how I realized that is that, yeah, because the the um, the belief at that time was that the Ukraine was getting a lot of Western weapons at the start, or close to the start. There were going to be deliveries and whatnot of whatever, and it really was not true. I was with a brigade, and I said, I want to film some Western weapons, and hear the guys say what a game changer they are, so that people in the West could see like the benefit of giving Ukraine these weapons. And I was told we don't have any. That's exactly what I was told. And then I realized that the people in the West just don't really, they're not getting the real story. So are you thinking of making another film on this?
You know, I didn't want to make a film about the war. I thought, you know, I should make a third film, but maybe it would be like after the war, like rebuilding. So there's so many films about like the horrors of war or how fucked up shit is. You know, I want to tell a story that's not being told. And I thought, you know, I'd like it to be something positive.
Yeah, I've thought about that. Right now, there's such a saturation of stuff that your films, I think, are really interesting because they are different. They're different in the way that I mentioned. There'll be nonfiction that'll be good. I mean, fictional films, but for documentaries, I'm even thinking of working on one now that has to do with Reconstruction starting now,
Hmm.
uh, during the war. That goes
All right, you sure?
late, that starts because there are Reconstruction projects now that
Sure.
that are working towards when the war is over, and that could be interesting.
I mean, my films had a certain appeal because, you know, I was first doing the first person thing just 'cause I decided because, you know, I didn't have a central character that my because of my
Right.
background that it would add a unique, you know, like perspective to it. And being on the scene, I try to ask questions, like you said, that are in the moment. So it's not like someone looking back or retelling it. I'm like telling the story in the moment. So it brings the viewer like there more. So, you know, now that I'm here, I don't know. You know, that was like what worked for me. You know,
Also, you have a young kid. My kids are older. If I
yeah,
get bad thing happen to me, I don't want anything bad to happen to me. They'll be all right. I mean, there's a personal thing
yeah.
too. If my kids were, you know, 10 years old, I don't think I would go to Bakhmut.
Yeah, yeah, my kid's 7, so it's
Yeah, so I mean, it's a whole different,
yeah,
you're at a different phase of your life.
yeah.
Um, and your kid's more important. It's like they're that's how I feel about it, And so then it's like it's better that you stay safe.
That was the conclusion. Well, yeah, yeah. Plus, there's so many people telling stories. It's like what I didn't have something that like, oh, when I did those Maidan pieces, like no one was really covering that, really.
Yeah.
At least not from the West so much. So
Or not in the way that you did it. I really I learned something from it. I'm no stranger to this topic. I think at this point, which is very good, that many people, especially decision makers in the West, no longer call it Putin's war.
yeah,
They like, they understand that this is a Russian project. And that was kind of pretty much key. People say Putin did this, Putin did that, but now it's like the Russians did this, or the Russians did that, or the Russians won't agree to it. It's just the way the Russians are. And I really think that the whole place is rotten.
За свободу свою вставай!